The Manhattan street at dusk carried its usual noise until a mocking laugh cut through, followed by a woman's voice, tight with fear. 3 young men had cornered her on the sidewalk, blocking her path, throwing words that made her shoulders pull in. Most pedestrians lowered their heads and walked faster, but at the far end of the block, one man stopped. He was a black single father who understood how much silence could hurt. Seconds later, the entire street went quiet. What happened? Marcus Brooks had been walking home from the hardware store when he heard it. The laugh came first, sharp and theatrical, the kind that demanded attention. He was 43 years old and had learned to recognize certain sounds. This one carried an edge that made him slow his pace without thinking. The street was busy enough. People moved past him with the practiced indifference of city dwellers at dusk, eyes forward, earbuds in, already thinking about dinner or the next train. Marcus carried a small bag with light bulbs and cabinet hinges. His daughter needed better lighting in her room for homework. She was 12 now and stayed with him on weekdays. The simple tasks of keeping their apartment functional filled most of his evenings. He had been a father for 12 years and a single one for almost 4. His wife had died in a car accident caused by a driver who had been texting. The police report listed it as vehicular manslaughter. Marcus listed it as something that should never have happened. Since then, he had become someone who noticed when things went wrong around him. He could not walk past indifference anymore. The second laugh was louder, followed by a voice that carried false friendliness over something uglier. Marcus stopped completely now, standing near a mailbox while others flowed around him. He turned his head slightly and saw them 50 feet away. 3 young men, probably early 20s, formed a loose semicircle around a woman on the sidewalk. She had been trying to walk past them. They had stepped into her path. The woman wore business clothes, a gray blazer and dark pants, and carried a leather bag over one shoulder. Her name was Rachel Moore, though Marcus did not know that yet. She worked as a paralegal at a firm 6 blocks away and had stayed late finishing a brief. She was 31 years old and had made this walk home hundreds of times without incident. Tonight was different. Tonight, 3 strangers had decided she was their entertainment. The one in front spoke again, his voice carrying that forced casual tone that barely disguised the threat underneath. He was tall and wore a black jacket with the hood pulled up despite the mild weather. His name was Dylan, and he considered himself someone who did not back down from anything. The 2 others flanked him. Eric stood to the left, shorter and stockier, wearing a faded band shirt. Luke was on the right, thin and twitchy with nervous energy that showed in how he kept shifting his weight. Dylan stepped closer to Rachel, closing the space she had tried to create. His words came out smooth and mocking. "Where are you going so fast? We just want to talk." Rachel's voice came back strained, trying to sound firm but betraying the fear underneath. "I need to get past. Excuse me." She tried to step around them. Luke moved to block her. It was coordinated enough to show they had done this before, or something like it. The casual cruelty of bored young men who had discovered that intimidation gave them a feeling of power. Dylan grinned, looking at his friends like they were in on a joke. "She needs to get past. Did you hear that? She's busy." Eric laughed, the sound forced and performative. "Too busy for us? That's cold." Rachel's shoulders pulled inward, her body language shifting from assertive to protective. She looked around for help. Pedestrians walked past. Some glanced over. None stopped. This was Manhattan. People had learned not to see too much. Marcus watched all of this happen in the span of maybe 20 seconds. His dark brown hands tightened around the plastic bag he carried. He had a choice to make. The same choice everyone else walking past had already made. Keep moving. Get home. Do not get involved. He had a daughter waiting for him. He had dinner to make, and bills to review, and a normal evening to get through. But he also remembered what silence looked like. He remembered standing at a hospital, hearing that his wife had not survived, knowing that someone's carelessness had erased her from the world. He remembered the months after, when neighbors and co-workers had looked at him with sympathy, but had not known what to say. So they said nothing. Silence had a weight. It pressed down. It told you that what happened to you did not matter enough for anyone to act. Rachel was trying to speak again, her voice higher now, genuine fear breaking through. Please just let me go. Dylan's grin widened. He was enjoying this. Let you go? We're not holding you. You can leave any time. He spread his arms mockingly, still blocking her path. Eric and Luke closed in slightly, tightening the circle. Marcus made his decision. It was not heroic or calculated. It was simply that he could not walk away from this and still recognize himself when he got home. He set the bag down carefully beside the mailbox. Someone would probably take it, but that did not matter right now. He turned and started walking toward them. His footsteps were steady, not rushed. He was not a large man, just average height with deep brown skin and a build that showed he stayed active but was not trying to intimidate anyone. He wore jeans and a dark blue jacket over a plain shirt. Nothing about his appearance suggested he was someone to worry about. He was just a black man in his 40s walking down a city street, but something in how he moved made Dylan notice. The young man's head turned slightly, tracking Marcus's approach. For a moment, the grin stayed in place, but his eyes narrowed. Eric and Luke noticed too, their attention shifting from Rachel to this new variable. Marcus closed the distance between them, his face calm. He did not look angry. He looked like someone who had already decided what he was going to do and was simply following through. When he was 10 feet away, Dylan straightened up slightly, the mocking tone shifting to something more defensive. Dylan's voice carried a challenge now. You got a problem? Marcus stopped a few feet from them, positioning himself so he was slightly between Rachel and the 3 young men. He spoke quietly, his voice level and clear. Yeah, let her go. The simplicity of it caught Dylan off guard for a second. There was no aggression in Marcus's tone, no posturing, just a statement of fact. Dylan recovered quickly, his grin returning, but harder now, more aggressive. This is none of your business, old man. Marcus did not react to the insult. He had been called worse. His eyes moved briefly to Rachel, who stood frozen, her face pale. Then he looked back at Dylan. It is now. Eric stepped forward, his chest puffed out. You think you're some kind of hero? There's 3 of us. Marcus's expression did not change. I can count. Luke laughed nervously, trying to break the tension with bravado. Man's got jokes. You want to get hurt for someone you don't even know? Marcus finally showed something, a small tightening around his eyes that suggested he was calculating risks and had already accepted them. He spoke again, still quiet, still steady. Walk away, all 3 of you, right now. Dylan took a step closer, trying to regain control of the situation. His voice rose slightly, loud enough for people nearby to hear. Or what? You're going to fight all 3 of us? Marcus did not answer immediately. He shifted his weight slightly, and something in that small movement made Dylan's confidence flicker. It was the way someone moved when they knew exactly what they were capable of. Marcus had not been in the military, but he had taken years of martial arts classes after his wife died, needing something physical to channel his grief into. He was not looking for a fight, but if one came, he would not lose. The moment stretched out. People on the street had started to slow down, noticing the confrontation. A few had stopped completely, phones out, but not calling anyone yet, just watching. Rachel stood completely still, her breathing shallow. Marcus spoke one more time, his voice carrying a weight that made Dylan actually take a half step back despite himself. Last chance. Dylan's face flushed. He had been challenged in front of his friends, in front of witnesses, and his pride would not let him back down. His hands clenched into fists. Eric and Luke tensed beside him, ready to follow his lead. The street seemed to hold its breath. Traffic noise faded into background static. The only sounds were their breathing and the distant wail of a siren blocks away. Marcus stood ready, his body relaxed but prepared. He had made his choice. Whatever came next, he would see it through. Dylan's laugh came out sharp and bitter. He turned to Eric and Luke, shaking his head like he could not believe what he was seeing. This guy thinks he's going to do something. Look at him. Eric grinned, feeding off Dylan's energy. His voice carried that false bravado that came from being part of a group. Probably watches too many movies. Thinks he's going to save the day. Luke shifted on his feet, his nervous energy translating into aggression now. Man's like 40-some, acting tough. This is going to be embarrassing for you, old-timer. Marcus said nothing. He had learned years ago that talking during confrontation was usually a mistake. Words gave people time to work themselves up, to convince themselves they were braver than they were. Silence was often more effective. He stood with his weight balanced, hands loose at his sides, watching all three of them with the kind of attention that made Dylan uncomfortable, even if he would not admit it. Rachel had moved slightly to the side during the exchange, trying to create distance between herself and everyone involved. Her breathing was quick and shallow. She looked at Marcus with something between hope and terror, clearly wanting him to help, but afraid of what might happen to him. Her hands clutched her bag tightly against her body. Dylan took another step forward, closing the gap between himself and Marcus to maybe 4 feet. Close enough to be threatening, far enough to still have reaction time if things went wrong. His voice dropped lower, trying to sound dangerous. You really want to do this over some random woman you don't even know? Marcus's response came quiet and matter-of-fact. I know enough. The simplicity of it threw Dylan off again. He had expected anger or righteousness, something he could push back against. Instead, Marcus just stood there, like this was a decision he had already made and was now simply seeing through. Dylan's jaw tightened. He glanced at his friends, needing their support to keep his confidence up. Eric moved closer on Marcus's left, trying to create a triangle that would force Marcus to divide his attention. You're making a really stupid choice here. We were just talking to her, having a conversation. Marcus's eyes flicked to Eric, then back to Dylan, tracking both of them. His voice stayed level. No, you were scaring her. That's done now. Luke let out an exaggerated laugh, but it sounded forced. Oh, it's done. You're telling us what's done? He looked at the small crowd that had formed, playing to them. Everybody see this old man here thinks he runs the street. A few people in the crowd had their phones out now, recording. Marcus noticed, but did not care. This was not about looking good or being right. It was about making sure Rachel could walk away safely. Everything else was secondary. Dylan's face flushed darker. Being called out in public, in front of witnesses with cameras, was not how this was supposed to go. He had thought the woman would be an easy target, maybe cry a little, give them some entertainment for a few minutes. Now this stranger had turned it into something that made him look weak if he backed down. His pride would not allow that. The young man's voice rose, anger bleeding through the false confidence. You think you're some kind of hero? You think anyone here actually cares what happens to you? Marcus finally showed something, the smallest tightening at the corners of his mouth. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight that made several people in the crowd lean in to hear. I think you're about to find out what happens when you pick the wrong person to push around. The air on the street changed. It was subtle but real. People stopped pretending they were not watching. The ambient noise of the city seemed to dial down a notch. Even the traffic felt quieter. This was no longer just street harassment that people could ignore. This was something building toward violence, and everyone could feel it. Dylan's hands clenched into fists. Eric cracked his knuckles. Luke bounced slightly on his toes, that nervous energy looking for an outlet. They were working themselves up, convincing themselves they could take this middle-aged man who had the audacity to challenge them. 3 against 1. Easy odds. Rachel's voice came out small and frightened, directed at Marcus. Please, I can just go. It's okay. Marcus did not turn to look at her, keeping his eyes on the 3 men. It's not okay. Not until they leave. Dylan laughed, but it sounded ugly now. She wants to go. You heard her. But you're making this into something it doesn't need to be. So, whatever happens next, that's on you. He took one more step forward, now close enough that Marcus could smell the beer on his breath. Dylan was trying to intimidate through proximity, betting that Marcus would flinch or back up. Instead, Marcus stood perfectly still, and something in that absolute lack of fear made Dylan's confidence waver for just a second. That second was enough. Dylan saw it reflected in his own hesitation and hated it. His pride surged back, fueled by embarrassment. He shoved Marcus's shoulder, not hard enough to really hurt, but hard enough to provoke. What are you going to do now, hero? Marcus absorbed the shove without moving his feet, just rolling his shoulders slightly to dissipate the force. His eyes never left Dylan's face. The younger man was breathing harder now, working himself up to actual violence. Eric and Luke tensed, ready to jump in the moment Dylan threw the first real punch. The crowd had grown to maybe 20 people now, forming a rough circle around them. Someone in the back yelled for someone to call the cops. No one did. Everyone just watched, phones up, documenting but not intervening. Rachel stood frozen at the edge of the circle, her face pale, clearly wanting to run but unable to make herself move. Dylan's voice came out harsh and loud, playing to the audience. Now, you got something to say? Or are you just gonna stand there like an idiot? Marcus spoke quietly, his words cutting through Dylan's bluster. I'm gonna give you one more chance. Walk away. Take your friends. Leave her alone. This ends now. Dylan sneered. Or what? You're gonna fight all 3 of us? You're gonna beat us up in front of all these people? That's assault, old man. That's jail time. Marcus's expression did not change. Only if I started. The implication hung in the air. Dylan understood it immediately. If he threw the first punch, Marcus could claim self-defense. But backing down now, after all of this, in front of everyone watching and recording, would destroy whatever reputation he thought he had. He was trapped by his own ego. Dylan's face twisted with anger and humiliation. He made his decision. His right hand came up fast, aiming a punch at Marcus's face, crude and telegraphed, but carrying real intent to hurt. Marcus moved. It was not dramatic or flashy. He simply stepped offline to his left, the punch passing through empty air where his head had been a split second before. His right hand came up and caught Dylan's extended arm at the wrist, controlling it. His left hand snapped forward, palm striking Dylan's chest hard enough to drive the air from his lungs and send him stumbling backward. The whole thing took maybe 2 seconds. Eric reacted on instinct, charging forward from Marcus's left with his arms spread wide, trying to tackle him. Marcus pivoted, using Dylan's momentum and his grip on the younger man's wrist to swing him directly into Eric's path. The two of them collided hard, Dylan's shoulder catching Eric in the face. Both men went down in a tangle of limbs. Luke stood frozen for a moment, shocked by how fast his friends had been taken down. Then his fear translated into aggression, and he rushed forward, swinging wildly. Marcus stepped inside the wild punch, got his left arm around Luke's extended right arm, and used the young man's own momentum to take him off balance. A quick trip, and Luke went down hard onto the pavement, the impact knocking the wind out of him. The entire confrontation from Dylan's first punch to all 3 men on the ground had taken less than 10 seconds. The street went absolutely silent. No one spoke. No one moved. Even the ambient city noise seemed to have been sucked away. The only sounds were Dylan gasping for air, Eric groaning and holding his face where Dylan's shoulder had hit him, and Luke trying to catch his breath on the concrete. Marcus stood in the middle of them, breathing slightly harder, but otherwise composed. His hands were already back at his sides, loose and ready. He had not punched anyone, had not kicked anyone while they were down, had simply moved with precise efficiency, using their own aggression against them. 4 years of martial arts training, channeling grief into discipline, had made him competent. But more than that, he had been calm. That was what really mattered. He had not been angry or scared. He had simply done what needed to be done. The crowd stared. Phones continued recording, but no one said anything. The violence had been so sudden and so controlled that it had shocked everyone into silence. Rachel stood with both hands over her mouth, her eyes wide. Dylan rolled onto his side, trying to get his breath back. His face was red with exertion and embarrassment. Eric was sitting up, one hand on his nose, checking for blood. Luke remained on his back, staring at the darkening sky, his chest heaving. Marcus looked down at them and spoke, his voice still quiet, but carrying clearly in the silence. "Get up. Leave. Don't come back." Dylan tried to speak, but could not get enough air yet. Eric found his voice first, though it came out weak and frightened. "Man, we didn't mean anything. We were just messing around." Marcus's expression hardened slightly. "You were hurting someone. That's not messing around." Luke sat up slowly, looking at Marcus like he was seeing a completely different person than the middle-aged man who had first approached them. "We're going. We're going." Dylan finally got his breath back enough to speak, though he stayed on the ground. His voice came out and stripped of all its earlier bravado. "Jesus, who are you?" Marcus did not answer that. He took a step back, giving them room to get up, but keeping himself between them and Rachel. His message was clear. They could leave, but they would not get near her again. The 3 young men got to their feet slowly, checking themselves for injuries. Nothing was broken, nothing was bleeding, but their pride was shattered. Dylan would not look at Marcus directly anymore. Eric kept glancing at the crowd with their phones, knowing this was probably already online somewhere. Luke just wanted to be anywhere else. Dylan's voice came out quiet, defeated. "We're leaving." Marcus nodded once. "Say it to her." Dylan's head snapped up, confused. "What?" Marcus gestured toward Rachel with his chin. "Apologize to her. All of you." Eric looked like he might argue, but one look at Marcus's face made him change his mind. He turned toward Rachel, his voice shaky. "I'm sorry. We shouldn't have done that." Luke followed quickly, eager to be done with this. "Yeah, sorry. Really sorry." Dylan was last, and it clearly cost him something to do it. He looked at Rachel for the first time since Marcus had intervened, saw the fear still on her face, and something in him seemed to crack. His voice came out genuinely ashamed. "I'm sorry. That was wrong. I'm really sorry." Rachel did not respond. She just stared at them, still processing everything that had happened. Marcus gestured toward the street. "Now go." They went. Dylan walked first, his shoulders hunched, not looking at anyone. Eric and Luke followed close behind, their earlier confidence completely gone. They disappeared into the crowd, then around a corner, and were gone. The silence on the street stretched for another moment. Then someone in the crowd said something Marcus could not make out, and suddenly everyone was talking at once. People were showing each other their phone screens, replaying what they had just recorded. A few approached Marcus trying to ask questions, congratulate him, get his name. Marcus ignored all of it. He turned to Rachel, who was still standing frozen, her hand still clutching her bag. He moved toward her slowly, making sure not to startle her. When he was a few feet away, he spoke gently. "You're safe now. They're gone." Rachel's face crumpled, and for a moment it looked like she might cry. Instead, she took a shaky breath and nodded. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "Thank you. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't." Marcus shook his head slightly. "You don't need to thank me." She looked at him, really looked at him, seeing the man who had stepped in when no one else would. "What's your name?" For a moment, Marcus considered walking away without answering, but something in her face, the genuine gratitude mixed with residual fear, made him respond. "Marcus." Rachel managed a small, shaky smile. "I'm Rachel. Thank you, Marcus. Really." He nodded. "Are you okay to get home?" She looked around at the crowd, at the street that had returned to something closer to normal, and nodded. "Yes, I think so." Marcus watched her for another moment, making sure she truly was steady enough to continue. Then he turned away and started walking back toward where he had left his bag by the mailbox. The crowd parted for him, several people trying to speak to him, but he moved through them without engaging. The bag was still there, surprisingly. Marcus picked it up and continued down the street in the opposite direction from where Dylan and his friends had gone. Behind him, the crowd was still buzzing, replaying videos, talking about what they had witnessed. Marcus just walked, his hands steady, his breathing returning to normal. He had a daughter waiting at home. He had light bulbs to install. Life continued. He had done what needed to be done, and now he was ready to go back to being invisible again. Marcus had walked maybe 30 feet before Rachel called after him. Her voice was still shaky, but louder now, carrying over the noise of the crowd and traffic. "Wait, please." He stopped and turned back. She was moving toward him, walking quickly, but not running like she needed to catch him before he disappeared completely. The crowd had mostly dispersed now, people returning to their own lives, though a few still lingered, watching or talking in small groups about what they had just witnessed. Rachel reached him slightly out of breath. Up close, Marcus could see she had been crying, though she had tried to hide it. Her eyes were red, and her hands still trembled slightly as she adjusted the strap of her bag. She looked at him with an intensity that made him uncomfortable, like she was trying to understand who he was and why he had done what he did. Her voice came out stronger now, though still marked by everything she had just been through. "I need to know. Why did you help me?" No one else stopped. Marcus shifted the bag in his hand, the light bulbs inside making a small clinking sound. He had not expected this question and was not sure he had a good answer. He thought about his daughter at home, probably doing homework at the kitchen table. He thought about his wife, gone 4 years, but still shaping every decision he made. He thought about all the times he had seen people look away from suffering because it was easier. Finally, he spoke quietly because someone needed to. Rachel's eyes filled with tears again, but she blinked them back. "That's not a real answer. You could have been hurt. They could have had weapons. You didn't know me. You had no reason to get involved." Marcus considered this. She was right. Of course, there were a dozen logical reasons why he should have kept walking. But logic had stopped mattering the moment he heard fear in her voice. He had learned through loss and grief that some things mattered more than safety or convenience. His response came out simple and honest. "I have a daughter. She's 12. If someone did that to her someday, I would want to believe that someone would step in. I would need to believe it." The words hung between them. Rachel nodded slowly, understanding something in that explanation that went deeper than the surface meaning. She wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand, trying to compose herself. A woman approached them from the remaining crowd, older, maybe 60, with gray hair and kind eyes. She addressed Marcus directly. "That was a brave thing you did. Not many people would have done that." Marcus shook his head slightly. It wasn't brave. It was just necessary. The woman smiled sadly. "Those are the same things sometimes." She turned to Rachel. "Are you all right, dear? Do you need someone to walk you home?" Rachel looked surprised by the offer, like she had forgotten that kindness could exist alongside cruelty. I think I'm okay now. Thank you." The older woman patted her arm gently. "You take care of yourself." She nodded at Marcus, a gesture of respect, and then walked away. Marcus watched the street returning to its normal rhythm. People walked past them now without staring. Traffic moved steadily. The incident was already fading into just another story people would tell later. Another video that would circulate for a day or two before being forgotten. But for Rachel, he knew this would stay with her. Trauma did not fade just because the immediate danger had passed. He looked at her carefully, assessing whether she was really okay to continue alone. "Where do you live? How far?" Rachel gestured vaguely down the street. 6 blocks that way. I've walked it 1,000 times. Marcus understood what she was not saying. She had felt safe on this route before. Now she would always remember what had happened here, would always wonder if it could happen again. That was another kind of damage, invisible but real. He made a decision. "I'll walk with you at least until you're closer to home." Rachel looked like she might protest, insist she was fine, but then simply nodded. "Thank you." They started walking together, falling into step naturally. For the first few blocks, neither spoke. Marcus carried his bag of hardware store supplies. Rachel kept her bag clutched close to her body, her eyes scanning the street more carefully than she probably ever had before. Finally, she broke the silence. "What you did back there, That wasn't luck. You knew exactly what you were doing. Marcus kept his eyes forward. I've had some training. After my wife died, I needed something physical, something to focus on. Rachel glanced at him and dropped it, hearing the weight in those few words. I'm sorry about your wife. He nodded, accepting the condolence without elaborating. Some losses were too large to explain to strangers, even kind ones. They walked another block in silence. Rachel spoke again, her voice thoughtful now. Those guys, they thought they could do whatever they wanted, that no one would stop them. Marcus had been thinking about Dylan, Eric, and Luke as well. They were young and stupid, fueled by group dynamics and the false sense of power that came from intimidating someone weaker. But they had learned something tonight. They had discovered that actions had consequences, that someone might push back, that they were not untouchable. His response came measured. They learned differently. Rachel almost smiled at that, though it did not quite reach her eyes. Do you think they'll actually change? Or will they just be more careful next time? It was a good question. Marcus had no real answer. I don't know. Maybe they'll remember being scared. Maybe that'll be enough. They had reached a busier intersection now, one with better lighting and more people around. Rachel stopped, indicating a building half a block away. That's my place. I'm okay from here. Marcus looked at the building at the well-lit entrance and the doorman visible through the glass. She would be safe the rest of the way. He nodded. All right. Rachel turned to face him fully, and her expression had shifted from fear and gratitude to something more complex. Marcus, what you did tonight, that matters. I know you probably don't want me to make a big deal out of it, but it matters. You gave me my safety back. Marcus felt uncomfortable with the praise, but understood she needed to say it. I just did what I hoped someone would do for my daughter. Rachel reached out and touched his arm briefly, a gesture of connection and thanks. Your daughter is lucky to have you. Something in Marcus's chest tightened. He thought about getting home, about Layla sitting at the table with her homework, about the normal evening waiting for him. That normalcy felt precious suddenly, something worth protecting. He spoke quietly. Take care of yourself. Be careful. Rachel nodded. I will. And Marcus, thank you really for everything. He watched her walk to her building, watched her key in the entry code and step inside where the doorman greeted her. She turned and waved once through the glass, and Marcus raised his hand in response. Then she disappeared into the elevator and was gone. Marcus stood there for a moment longer, making sure she was truly safe. Then he turned and started the walk back to his own apartment. The streets felt different now, charged with the aftermath of violence, even though everything looked normal. He passed people laughing, couples holding hands, someone walking a small dog. Life continued everywhere, uninterrupted except for those directly involved. He thought about Dylan and his friends, wondered where they were now, probably somewhere licking their wounds, dealing with the humiliation of being beaten so easily, trying to process what had happened. Maybe they would learn from it. Maybe they would just be more careful about who they targeted. Marcus could not control that. He could only control his own choices. When he reached his building 20 minutes later, he climbed the 3 floors to his apartment, his legs feeling the day's exhaustion. He unlocked the door and stepped inside to find Layla exactly where he had pictured her, at the kitchen table with her math textbook open, pencil moving across paper. She looked up and smiled. Hey, Dad, you were gone a while. Marcus set the bag on the counter, the light bulbs and hinges making their small sound. hardware store was crowded. The lie came easily, automatic. There was no reason to tell her what had happened. She was 12. She did not need to know yet that the world could be cruel, that sometimes her father had to step into dangerous situations to help strangers. Layla accepted this without question and returned to her homework. Marcus moved to the sink, washed his hands, and started thinking about dinner. The apartment was warm and safe, filled with the mundane details of their life together. This was what he had been protecting when he stopped on that street. Not just Rachel, but this, the ability for people to live without fear, to walk home safely, to do homework at kitchen tables. He pulled chicken from the refrigerator and started preparing a simple meal. His hands were steady. The adrenaline had faded completely. He was just a single father making dinner for his daughter, like thousands of other parents were doing at that exact moment all across the city. Layla spoke without looking up from her work. "Did you get the light bulbs?" Marcus glanced at the bag on the counter. "Yeah, I'll install them after dinner." She nodded, satisfied, and bent back over her math problems. Marcus watched her for a moment. This small black girl who was his entire world and felt the familiar weight of responsibility mixed with love. He would always step in when someone needed help. He would always choose action over silence, not because he was brave or heroic, but because he wanted to live in a world where people did not look away. The street had gone silent tonight when violence met resistance, but real change happened in moments like this. In quiet apartments, where fathers taught daughters by example that cruelty was not something to tolerate, that standing up mattered, that one person could make a difference. Marcus turned on the stove and started cooking. Outside, the city continued its endless rhythm. Somewhere, Rachel was safe in her apartment, processing what had happened. Somewhere, 3 young men were reconsidering their choices, and here in this small kitchen, a man who had lost everything once was building something new with his daughter, one ordinary evening at a time. The light bulbs could wait. Dinner came first. Life moved forward.